everyone! Today I'm going to be doing some mountain studies using gouache. I recently filled up a sketchbook with a lot of landscape paintings, and one of the themes that I painted was mountain paintings, and I saw quite a few comments asking for tutorials of how I paint mountains, so I thought I would just make a video just showing the process behind how I kind of approach mountain paintings. I'm going to be using my gouache today, and for paper I'm just using the Canon XL mixed media paper, which I've just cut into a smaller size. Before I jump into the painting, I just wanted to say thank you to SKILLSHARE for sponsoring this video. If you haven't already yet heard of them, SKILLSHARE is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes covering a broad range of topics ranging from illustration to creative writing, film and video, entrepreneurship, and so much more. I actually started off learning how to use gouache on SKILLSHARE, and the classes on there were really helpful to me. If you guys are interested, I can leave a list of gouache classes I took that I really liked when I was first starting out. A topic that I wanted to learn more about recently was values, and so I took a class by Kendall Hilligus called Shading and Values: Use the Power of Light and Shadow to Create Realistic Art. If you have no idea what value is, then this is the perfect introduction to the topic. The class is only 1 hour long, but it covers so much information. One thing that I learned from this class was Kendall's method of look, lay down, compare, and adjust. I really like this method for understanding how to interpret reference photos and being able to transfer what you see and to lay down the correct values on paper. So if you guys are interested in learning about any kind of new topic, say you want to learn more about color theory or composition, you can just search for that topic and there will be plenty of classes on it. The classes are delivered in bite-sized lessons, with a lot of them being under 60 minutes. So if you want to learn something new, it's very easy to just dive into a topic and get started. It's also less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. If you're interested in trying the platform, the first 1,000 people to use the link in my description will get a free trial of SKILLSHARE Premium membership. So before I start painting, I always just do a quick light sketch. So here I'm just lightly penciling in the shape of the mountain, and this step also helps me to just analyze the reference photo a bit more, because as I'm sketching I'm having to look at the reference photo. I will also leave the references up in the corner so you can see what I'm working off of, and I'll have the full images linked in my description in case you also want to have a look at the full reference photo if you want to study from it. I get most of my references from Pexels, Unsplash or Pixabay. They're all great places to get copyright-free reference photos. I think when it comes to painting mountains, when you first look at the reference photo, you might get overwhelmed by the amount of detail on there. There's a lot of planes, a lot of crevices, a lot of tiny details here and there, and it's very easy to just kind of get lost in those details. And what I've tried to do is to tell myself to look past all of those details and just focus on the planes that I can see. So the first thing I kind of do is I just establish where the light source is coming from. So in this image I can see the light source is coming from the left hand side, because you can see the left side facing planes are illuminated and the shadows are on the right side facing planes. So with that in mind, I try to just focus on carving out those planes first. So my first step is to just kind of lay down that base layer, and I just carve out the brighter side and the darker side. So I'm focusing on the values really. I'm trying to get lighter values on the left side facing planes and darker values on the right side to create that illusion of depth in the mountain. So that's kind of the first step in the painting process. Now when I look back at this painting, I can see that the values on my left side were probably a little bit too dark, so that there wasn't enough contrast to kind of create that illusion of the crevices in the mountain. And this reference photo was, I think, the hardest out of the 4 that I chose. This painting took me the longest amount of time, and I think it's because I actually fell into my own trap of getting lost in the details, and it's probably because I just didn't quite get the values right, so it wasn't looking obvious enough to me. So I started going into the details so that I could kind of have more confidence that I was going in the right direction. But in the other 3 paintings later, I tried to get the the planes right first, get the base layer right before I start rendering out the details. So in this one you might see I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. I'm working on rendering out all the details on one side of the mountain, and then I kind of jump around and go back and render out the details on the other side. And it's probably just because I wanted to make it look more realistic and have more assurance that I was going in the right direction. So anyways, another tricky thing about mountain paintings that I found was trying to get the color of the snow correct. So snow is white, but in different lighting it might look a bit more gray or a bit more blue, a bit more purple, a bit more pinkish, and I think it depends on the lighting that is hitting it. The color of the sky can give you a clue as to what color the snow might be. For example, in this painting, for the snow that was in the shadow, so the part that faces the right side, I mixed Prussian blue with some burnt umber to tone it down, and I think I also mixed in some of the rose paint from the Himi set so that it would kind of have a bluish purplish kind of muted color. So instead of the snow being white, to paint it in shadow it kind of turns a bit more grayish blue or grayish purple. So that's another thing to keep in mind to make it look more realistic. And then for the brightest part, so the white snow that's facing the light source, I try to use the paper to my advantage. So I use the white of the paper and I just preserve that area and just paint around it to make sure that that's actually the brightest part in the painting. I really like this second reference photo because the plains of the mountains are very obvious, so I think it's a really great photo to study off of. You can clearly see that the light source is coming from the left hand side and it's illuminating those left facing plains in pink, and the right side is in shadow and the shadow is this darker blue color. So it's a lot easier to kind of see how you can carve out the values in this painting. So I started off just by laying in the pink first, so I laid in where all the left side facing planes are in pink, and then I went over with some dark blue paint and just carved out where the right side facing planes are, so all the sides that are in shadow. And because it's so obvious, it wasn't hard for me to kind of lay down this base layer. I also noted that the mountain on the left, so the one that's further away in distance, is lighter in value, so I made sure that I used lighter values to paint that area so that there was a distinction between the two mountains, and it just further creates that illusion of depth to show that this mountain is in the foreground and that one is slightly further away. So these are a few of the things that I'm looking for or I'm noticing when I'm studying from this reference photo. I'm just looking for the light source and I'm trying to see which areas might be lighter, which ones are darker, and yeah, just really focusing on the values. And then once I have that base layer in, that's when I can go in and start rendering out the details. So I usually start with the shadows. I like to render out more of the shadows, so I go in and I add in a bit more of the darker blue, and then I'll go into the light and I'll start to highlight some areas so that it just looks more 3D. The third painting was also quite straightforward. If we analyze the reference photo, we can see that the brightest planes are facing upwards, so the light source should be coming from somewhere above, more towards maybe the left hand side. A good way to judge values is to squint your eyes. By squinting, you're forced to look past all of the details. So if you squint and have a look at this reference photo, the bright parts really stand out, and you can see those bright white highlights, they're all facing upwards, and then the darks also really stand out as well. But also keep in mind that this mountain is of a darker color, so even the parts facing the light will be darker because that's just the color of the mountain. And you can also see that parts of the snow that are not facing upwards are more of a blue-gray. So that also gives you a clue as to where the light source is coming from. So as long as you get those values right, you'll have a pretty accurate looking mountain. And so I just went with the same approach. I laid in all the darker parts first. So with this kind of painting, I like to use the white of the paper to my advantage. So I preserve those areas and I paint in all the darker parts. And then I start to paint in the areas of snow that are in shadow. So I just use a grayish mixture. I tend to avoid using just black and white. I usually go for blue and I'll tone it down with burnt umber just so that the color has a bit more life to it. So that's the color that I use for the shadow parts of the snow, and then I just let the white of the paper do the work for the brightest highlights. Now onto the last study, and again I just really followed the same process. I generally like to start by painting in the side that's in shadow first because it's just easier for me to start to see the mountain form, because the bright side, the white of the paper, helps to kind of show that side is in the light. So I always start with the shadow side and I really just adjust the values as I need to. For example, here you can see at the top, the left side, I think when I first laid it down, that's what I judged the value to be, but later I realized that it needed to be a little bit darker. So you'll see that I kind of go over that area just so I get a bit more contrast between the side that's in the light and the side that's in shadow. And that was really all I did for this piece. I think this fourth reference photo was also quite simple and I liked studying from this. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed watching me do these mountain studies, and I hope that my explanations kind of made sense. If you have any questions, just leave it down below, and I'll have all the reference photos in my description box as well in case you also want to have a go at studying from them. I think that the fourth and second reference photos were the easiest, and then the third one and the first one took me the most amount of time. So have a go yourself. I think that's the best way to learn, is to just practice lots. So hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in my next one. Bye bye.